Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese, and I'm back here for another solo episode for you. Sorry we haven't recorded over the past couple weeks. I've been really busy. Nick, obviously really busy. That's why he's not here again tonight. And I just didn't get a chance to get to the tape or really have much time to record. So I wasn't able to do much over the past couple weeks. But honestly, like I got to the offense of the Rams game over the weekend, but I still haven't gotten to the defense of that game, and I haven't gotten to the Lions game at all, although I was there live, so I kind of saw a lot of that. Just didn't get to those games, but we're going to go over the Colts game today, and then talk about the Jags kind of at the end of it. Obviously there's a lot left unsaid there with two straight losses in a row, but at the end of the day, it was a nice bounce back win against the Colts for the Vikings, right? I mean, the first half was terrible. Ended up down 7-0 is not where you want to be against this Colts team, especially with all the mistakes that the Vikings had. But they were able to put it together on offense, and it was good to see them be able to put it together on offense against, honestly, an inferior opponent in the Colts and kind of put the game away in the second half. They ended up winning 21-13. It's kind of a backdoor one-score game, right, with the Colts kicking that field goal with 30 seconds left just to give themselves a chance for the onside kick. And really, the Vikings really had a couple opportunities to put the game away, with it being an 11-point victory, and they let up a fourth down and then allowed that, defensive pass interference. So, really overall good game by the team, particularly on the defense's end of the ball. But the offense putting things together in the second half was really encouraging to see after having a bunch of mistakes in the first half. And that's kind of what I'm going to get into first, right? So obviously, it's never good when you don't score any points in a half. They had two missed field goals in that half. They had another turnover in the red zone, and they had the Darnold face mask and they got recovered for a fumble, right? So 4 absolute unacceptable disasters. Obviously, rookie kicker Will Reichard seemed like he pulled something in his quad. I was shocked that they had him continue to kick, especially like that last extra point instead of going for 2 or something. And then he was doing kickoffs as well, but he fought through that, made his 3 extra points. But obviously prior to that, he had missed a 53-yard field goal and then a 31-yard field goal attempt at the end of the half, which is really brutal. So he's going on IR is the news we got today. They're bringing John Parker Roma back. I mean, I don't really have much of a take on either of those guys, but just pointing out that it happened. But if we go back to kind of a couple other mistakes, right? So the first one is Sam Darnold's interception in the red zone. Just a really rough decision from Darnold. There was a little bit of pressure on the play, so he rolled out. I thought he probably could have hung in the pocket. It's not that big of a deal. He had, I believe it was Jordan Addison out towards the sticks for a first down as an option on that play if he'd thrown it as soon as he was kind of rolling out of the pocket. As he got further out, I would say that option went away a little bit, like he just needed to throw the ball quicker. I don't remember if it was Addison or Naylor who was kind of on the sideline there. And I kind of thought that was his best option on the play. As he got further out, it drew the corner into that. So I don't think he could have thrown it late in the down, like by the time he threw the pass to TJ Hockson. By the way, the interception was to TJ Hockson in the back of the end zone. Great to see that Hockson was back in the game. He didn't have like a massive impact, but it was cool to see him back. Hockson had leverage on, it was a safety in the back of the end zone that he was running away from on the scramble drill. The safety though was going to undercut the pass and was a little bit faster than Hockson. So he would have made it underneath Hockson. If the linebacker that Darnold didn't see at all wasn't also there. So Hockson kind of threw the ball low. Darnold kind of threw the ball low, kind of directly at Hockson while Hockson was drifting back towards the back line of the end zone. In that case, in the scramble drill, if your receiver's drifting back, you want to throw the ball what's known as high back 5. You either want to throw it low to the front of the end zone, like at the pylon, or you want to throw it high to the back of the end zone, high back 5, low front 5, kind of based on the area that your receiver is in the end zone. Darnold was trying to go low in this case, and he threw it right to a linebacker, right? And it would have been right to an undercutting safety, had the linebacker not been there. If he throws the ball high, he gives his target, 6'6" TJ Hockson a chance to go up and win the ball at the catch point, kind of at the back of the end zone, and make a toe tap catch as the ball's coming down. So it would have just been a better decision with the throw with the type of club that he used from Sam Darnold, could have helped that play. It may have resulted in the throwaway anyway, but that's a lot better than an interception, right? That takes points off the board. So, a pretty rough mistake from Darnold there. And then the second massive turnover in the first half, obviously was, and it's been replayed enough online. I think I tweeted a picture of it out as well, where Garrett Bradbury steps on Ed Ingram's foot as he's in pass protection. Bradbury kind of slips on that. He gets knocked over completely backwards. It looks awful live because it looks like Bradbury just immediately got knocked on his back. He got knocked on his back because he ended up slipping. But in my estimation, it wasn't necessarily Ingram's fault for having his foot in the wrong place. I think Bradbury overstepped as he tried to get out to block that rusher. So the Colts had 3 potential rush threats on that side of the ball. They had Grover Stewart, who's the one who made the play, in a 2-eye position, which is on the inside shoulder of the guard, in this case at Ingram. And then they actually had 2 players outside of the right tackle, Brian O'Neill. I think it was an edge type and then maybe another edge type, or maybe it was a defensive tackle type. So it was like an overloaded front to that right side. And both Bradbury needs to get out pretty wide, like 1 or 2 yards wide to be able to get to Grover Stewart and make an effective block on him. Ingram also needs to be able to get out super wide. You could argue that maybe Ingram needed to get his foot out of it quicker, but I thought Bradbury's base, if you saw him take that first step, was very bad. It was just too wide. So I think Bradbury just needs to take a smaller step, not step on Ed Ingram's foot, obviously, and get out with his second step to be able to block Stewart and kind of shield him off. As it was, Stewart ran him over, and then, of course, as we all know, hit Sam Darnold in the face. That kind of precipitates into a fumble that's returned for a touchdown. But, going on this is the second week in a row, obviously, against the Rams last week. The refs missed a very obvious face mask. In this case, the refs threw a flag. Like, the ref, I don't know what he was thinking. I guess he thought there was a tug on the face mask. And then after the game in the pool report, he said that he thought the primary contact was with the shoulder and that the face mask was incidental. I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous that Darnold gets hit in the face. And if you look at the video replay, it's very obvious that the arm hits the face mask first before hitting the other body parts. And that kind of helps with the fumble, right? Like, your reaction after you get hit in the face is a little bit different than your reaction when you get hit on the shoulder or something like that, especially as a quarterback. But it's just kind of absurd to me that the refs picked this flag up. Like, if you thought you saw the contact, then call the penalty for the contact. Don't be talked out of it by the other guys who don't have as good of an angle as the referee who saw the contact, right? That's frustrating to me. The second thing, and the much more frustrating thing to me, is that this isn't reviewable by the NFL at all. Like, in both of these instances, and they're both scoring plays, it's a very obvious penalty on the defender, right? So there's obviously forcible contact to the head or neck area, which is absolutely a penalty, a roughing the passer penalty. And that helps lead to the fumble, which helps lead to the touchdown for the Colts, really, and the only significant scoring that the Colts had in this football game. And the NFL has a review process for a ton of other things. They have, you can review what it catches, you can review all sorts of things, but you can't review these penalties. And even in penalties that they made reviewable, there is a reviewable element of roughing the passer. They can only take away a penalty after review rather than adding a penalty to a review. So that's why this wasn't reviewable at all. Like, the refs can't necessarily decipher these things very quickly live, but we can instantly see it on the replay in the camera. So we should give the refs a mechanism, or the NFL should have a mechanism in place for somebody like a Sky Judge, like the AAF had, like the XFL had, to quickly resolve these plays and call the penalties as they are. I wrote an article on this last year after the Denver Broncos game, where, if you remember, Kareem Jackson just speared Josh Dobbs on a play. It was a 3rd down. Well, it led to Dobbs fumbling, and it led to the Broncos scoring on the ensuing drive. Kareem Jackson previously had been suspended for lowering his helmet to make hits. He was suspended again after the game for making these hits, but he wasn't penalized live, even though on replay it was very obvious that he committed the penalty. Right. So these are game altering turnovers that are happening to the Vikings. And this isn't just a Vikings rant. This is for every team with game-altering turnovers caused by penalties by their opponent that there's nothing the refs can do to review and overturn it. So it's on the NFL to get this right. Like, the refs are going to struggle in some instances. They're not going to be perfect. I understand that they're going to be missed calls. The NFL needs to give them a better mechanism to get things right than just leaving it as a touchdown because the guy couldn't see the hit to the face, right? It's just really frustrating. So we have all that in the first half. The Vikings end up scoring 0 points, and then they come out in the second half and they absolutely start to dominate the football game on offense. I believe they scored, they scored on, I guess, 3 of 5 drives into the second half with the 1 play interception by Sam Darnold. But almost 3 of 4 drives there. Certainly, that Darnold, pick was a bad decision by Darnold. It wasn't kind of like a play design of the offense stalling out kind of thing. But Justin Jefferson really just kind of took over this game from the Vikings perspective. I mean, he had a couple nice plays in the first half. And Kevin O'Connell, as always, did a fantastic job of getting them open. There was a really nice design. And this is something that I remember calling back to earlier in the season, where I don't remember if it was against the Texans or the Packers or something like that. But maybe it was against the Jets. I don't know. It was definitely one of those 3 games. I gave you guys, so few options to choose from. But they had a deep overrun by Justin Jefferson with a hook on the same side from Johnny Munt to kind of hold the underneath hook defender, the linebacker, on that side. They had a very similar concept early in the game, which I thought was really impressive by O'Connell, where he did that for TJ Hawkinson running a hook on the side, and then Jefferson was running an in over top. It allowed Jefferson to clear the first hook defender, which was a safety, coming down kind of in cover 3, and Darnold fit the ball in really nice. It was a really nice anticipation throw from Darnold as well, but just a great design element that I wanted to call out there. But really, once he got to the second half, Justin Jefferson just took over. I have an article that's coming out for Zone Coverage. I think it'll come out probably by the time this podcast is out Wednesday morning, or when most people are listening to it. And the first thing I talk about, and I go into really great detail in the article, is the route that he runs to come out of the half on the very first play of the second half. It's a deep out route against off coverage by Jalen Jones, the corner for the Colts, and just everything from the stem to the break to the catch to breaking the tackle after the catch is absolutely phenomenal. Chris Collinsworth actually kind of broke this play a little bit live, and I thought he did a really good job of it too. But what Jefferson does to sell routes is just absolutely incredible. So you see him come out of this, lower his head to build in the speed phase. That knocks the cornerback a couple yards. And then he takes a slight angle to the outside, actually, where he goes from kind of being at the top of the number, the inside of the numbers to the middle of the numbers. And then he takes a sharper step inside, looking inside to pull the corner inside. And you can see that happen in the corner where he has to take a couple steps towards the middle of the field. Once, Jefferson's gotten him to commit, and the way his hips are flipped, he really would have to turn around the other direction to follow Jefferson as he breaks out, which is what he does, and Jefferson's able to break out and make the cut towards the outside. The thing with making sharp cuts like Jefferson does, and it was a little bit more of a speed cut, but that's okay. You want to get outside as quickly as possible, is you need to minimize the number of steps that you take in that cut, and that's what Jefferson is absolutely elite at. He takes 3 steps, 1 to begin his slowdown, 2 is the slowdown, and then 3 is the pivot step before he's able to bring his hips around outside and start to get his body turned around towards the football. That it's just a really impressive display of he's going full speed downfield. He's able to put a little bit of a move on the corner to get the corner in a poor position and then throttle it down and break outside. He breaks to the outside. He's at like the 49-yard line, and he's able to pull it back 2 yards to the 47-yard line to catch the football. And that's another key element of that route where he is able to, come back to the football. That creates separation from where the cornerback is, because the cornerback does a pretty good job. Like I was going to say, he doesn't do a bad job. I think he does a pretty good job of turning around with this Jefferson route. It's just that Jefferson eliminates the instead of standing there waiting for the football and allowing the corner to get back into the play, he just widens the gap that he's already created further by coming back to the football. And that's super key. And then just the effort to be able to break the tackle and get out of bounds, even if it didn't gain a bunch more yards, like all the damage had mostly been done on that play, just kind of shows the tenacity that he has as a player. Later in the game, there was a one-on-one that Jefferson had where he ended up wide open on a fade route. He just completely roasted the corner. I think that was Womack. And, got like 2 or 3 yards of separation deep. His athletic ability is outstanding. He didn't have like a crazy catch in that game, although that over-the-shoulder catch on that deep route that I'm talking about against Womack was pretty good. But obviously we just saw the absolutely absurd catch that he made in the Rams game last week. So it's not like he's any slouch in terms of those deeper catches. He ended the game with 7 receptions for 130 something yards. And right now he is the NFL's league leader in receiving yards by like 60 something yards over Jamar Chase. Almost everybody else in the top 10 list has played 9 games because they haven't had their bye yet. Only Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, who's like 100 plus yards beneath him, have played just 8 games. So it's really just absolutely phenomenal production from Justin Jefferson. He's a crazy percentage of the Vikings passing offense. He not only leads the NFL in target share with 30% of his targets, he also leads the NFL in what I'll call yardage share, meaning he has 40% of the Vikings total passing yards, which is an absolutely absurd number. But like, that differential is also absurd too. And if you want to learn a little bit more about that, go to my article on Zone Coverage. I broke down Jefferson's game a little bit, how he was kind of the spark of the team to bring them back for this victory. And also I came up with a couple of unique stats that kind of showed just how effective or how heavily used Jefferson is in this offense and how ridiculously efficient he's being when he is used for the offense. So, really good stuff there. I wanted to flip it over though now to a less exciting portion of the Vikings. Sam Darnold, ended up with 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I think at the end of the day, you take this kind of game from Sam Darnold because we still had enough positive plays, with the exception of the strip sack, right? Like if we include the strip sack as a real play, that was a massive negative. I think you probably don't take this game from Sam Darnold. But if we say, okay, really, he got unlucky there because of the penalty and the penalty caused the fumble and that sort of thing, I think you take the 3 touchdown, 2 interception game from Sam Darnold. I don't think Sam Darnold is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, I think that would have been a massive stretch. I even when he was playing well, I think it would have been a massive stretch to say that, like the Packers game or the week, that couple week stretch where he was really dealing quite well. But, and it obviously was like unfathomable that he would be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, from a numbers perspective prior to the season. But he is kind of, from a passing perspective, at least yards per attempt, things like that, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think that high variance is okay for the Vikings as a team who, I wasn't expecting much from Sam Darnold. But there are still mistakes that are happening time after time that he's going to need to clean up. He took a number of sacks in this game. I think, honestly, fewer in this game were his fault than there have been in some previous games, but he does hold on to the ball a little bit too long. I think I would like to see him get to that down to the check down more often. There was one particular one where the Vikings were on the edge of field goal range, and, they're running a couple deep routes that the Colts all have covered. There's pretty quick pressure. I want to say it was allowed by Brandell or somebody on a stunt. I can't exactly remember. But, with the quick pressure, I'd like to see Darnold basically skip his downfield reads and then get to the check down and throw the ball short. Instead, he holds onto the ball and just absolutely tries to run backwards, tries to spin out to his left, run backwards a little bit, and get sacked for a loss of like 14 or something. So this went to, if he had checked down, a gain of 6 or 7. The Vikings are on the fringe of field goal range. Will Rickard's hurt, so they probably go for it on like 4th and 3, 4th and 4 at like the 30-yard line. The Vikings absolutely have to punt because they're back on their own side of the field, behind the 50. It's just really a frustrating kind of turn of events from Darnold just taking that sack. I talked about the first interception, which I think is squarely on Darnold. I also think the second interception is squarely on Darnold. The Vikings were running dagger on that interception. So, Jordan Addison's running your clear out vertical route, which I'll call it a clear out route. Typically for dagger, for the most part, it works as a clear out route, but it is defined as the first read in that play structure as well. So against single high, you kind of run a post up between the two deep safeties. I'm sorry, against two high, you can run a post up against the two deep safeties, but this is against single high, so Addison will cut his route down more and kind of run underneath the deep safety and kind of try to, turn it into a deep over a little bit, like a very deep over route. And I think Addison absolutely has position on this play. Darnold, I think, comes off of that pretty quickly. I don't know if he's looking right, and he looks right a bare glance initially on the play until he comes back to Jefferson. Him looking back towards Jefferson does pull the safety a little bit, but Darnold could understand what's going to happen and pull the safety and, kind of take that look and then look off the safety towards Jefferson, come back and throw to Addison when he realizes that there's absolutely nobody to cover deep on the right side of the field besides that post safety that Addison's trying to run under. Even if he holds it to the right, the post safety is going to have a hard time coming down on that Addison route, and you can throw it flatter and have Addison come back to the ball and get a pretty significant gain. So I think that it's just a decision problem where Darnold had the option to hit Addison on that kind of deep, it's a vertical route, but it's maybe more of a deep over against the cover three. I think it was a cover three look that the Colts are playing, but he doesn't do that and instead kind of tries to force the ball to Justin Jefferson on the other side. Like, I don't typically have an issue with forcing the ball to Justin Jefferson. That seems to work out pretty well for the Vikings, but in this case, he's completely ignored a safety, a corner on that side who has ostensibly a flat route, but there wasn't really anybody to control the flat. I think it was a chip help from Jones or something, so he came out late, and that corner has fallen off underneath Jefferson's route. Darnold did do an okay job recognizing that, like, the linebacker under Jefferson was out of position, but this corner was right there and able to undercut it and pick the pass. So it's just a bad decision by Darnold, not seeing the full picture of the coverage, not taking a play that I thought was there. And that's a little bit frustrating, but I think we're just going to have to live with those issues from Darnold. There's a reason he was available as a free agent, and the Vikings are only paying him $10 million this year, right? He's not going to be an elite level quarterback, but I think, the 3 touchdowns in the second half showed that he can move the ball pretty well, and he can deliver the ball generally on time to his receivers throughout the course of the game. So at the end of the day, I may have some criticisms for Darnold, and I don't think he's a perfect quarterback, but I think he's been a quality starting quarterback for the Vikings, which is absolutely, to me, more than you could have asked for. Than what we were probably expecting was a bridge guy like a Jacoby Brissett who would play for a couple weeks and then play poorly enough that the rookie, in our case, J.J. McCarthy, played him off the field, right? We're stuck in the scenario where J.J. McCarthy's out for the season, but I still think, we have to be happy with Sam Darnold's play, especially considering that. One last thing I wanted to mention is TJ Hockenson, or at least on the passing side of things, was TJ Hockenson coming back. He didn't run a ton of routes. He was kind of 50-50. The Vikings still used a ton of Oliver Munt, and this was kind of the Josh Oliver game. Oliver had a really nice game from a production standpoint. Most of it was stuff in the flat where he was able to run after the catch. So, nothing really earth-shattering in terms of what he did. I thought the final touchdown was pretty cool from Oliver, where the Vikings basically were aggressive in a situation where they were running the ball consistently and called a play action shot that the Colts totally weren't prepared for. It led to Oliver being wide open for that touchdown. But back to TJ Hockenson real quick. I mentioned the one route where I think his route really helped Jefferson on the play, and I think that's something you can do in terms of attacking downfield vertically, and he had a 19-yard catch that I thought showcased his ability to attack down the field vertically on if I'm remembering correctly, an over route where he came across the field and, Darnold just delivered a nice throw for a 19-yard catch. I don't think that those kind of passing concepts were a staple of what the Vikings were doing early in the season, and they certainly weren't hitting Josh Oliver on it. The deeper plays that kind of targeted Josh Oliver were more vertical routes where it was kind of they were putting the defense's attention somewhere else so they could get Oliver down the field a little bit, and similar for Munn, right? So I think Hockenson being back as he gets more into the game plan his downfield attack will just add another layer to the Vikings downfield attack that's already very, very good, as I talked about with Justin Jefferson a little bit, right? So all good stuff there on the tight end front. Really, really excited to see TJ Hockenson back and how he gets incorporated in this offense as the season moves along and he gets healthier and healthier. So the next thing to turn it over to was the run game, which I had a little bit of ups and downs. I didn't think Ed Ingram was like disastrous or anything in this game. I know a lot of people came away with that impression, I feel like, and same with like Garrett Bradbury. Like, he had the play where he ended up tripping, but like overall, I thought he generally had a pretty good game, but like Ingram was definitely very up and down in run blocking in terms of his ability to get to linebackers at the second level. Like the Vikings had a number of plays where they would get, and whether it was duo or inside zone or whatever, they would get massive push on the defensive tackles for the Colts on double teams. And then they just wouldn't get off to the linebackers. So it would only be like a 3 or 4 yard gain for Aaron Jones. And he wasn't getting past where the linemen had blocked at all because they just completely missed the linebackers who were now kind of behind the Vikings offensive line. Right. So that's not to say there weren't good reps. Like there were some really phenomenal run blocking reps where Aaron Jones had a ton of space, and especially as it kind of wore the defense down at the end of the game, like that final drive where the Vikings ran 4 or 5 times, consistently moved the ball, and eventually ended up with a touchdown, was really good to see in a situation where the defense is very heavily guarding against the run because they know the offense wants to keep the clock moving and tried to run the clock out on them, right? So really good to see them pick that up at the end, some intermittent stuff in the middle, and then Cam Akers got his first significant snaps as a Minnesota Viking. So Cam, I thought he was running into a little bit more light boxes than Jones was. I thought the offensive line got phenomenal push on a couple of reps that Akers had, but even still, he was cutting well off of what he had and kind of working to maximize the gains a little bit. I thought there was one play where he had a misread, but out of 6 carries, at the end of the day, that's not too bad. And it was the only play he wasn't successful on, so I can't really complain too much. And even on that play, it was a muddy read. Like the defensive tackle did a good job of showing to one end of, I think it was Bradbury, and then ended up coming out the other side. So like, end of the day, it's not something to be concerned about, but I like seeing Cam Akers in there, as opposed to Ty Chandler, who appears to have fallen out of favor a little bit. I think Akers probably adds a little bit more consistency as a runner. I don't know about the explosive juice. I think Chandler has more juice than Akers does, but we'll see how it plays out moving forward. Pretty happy with the Vikings backfield of Aaron Jones and Cam Akers right now. And then the final person to get to on the offense is Cam Robinson, who debuted as a Minnesota Viking. I didn't really cover in here the move for Cam Robinson at all. I like the deal for the Vikings. I think it's hard to get a quality tackle in the NFL, and the Vikings certainly didn't have anybody on their roster who could play up to the level of Cam Robinson. In my opinion, I got to catch a couple of his Jags games. I thought he played pretty well in those games, including the Bills game where, he had his like worst PFF grade of the season by far. I do think you can beat him aside a little bit. And in this game, he kind of had an up and down game. I would say it was an admirable first game with the Minnesota Vikings. I wouldn't say it was a good game. There were a number of reps in pass protection where he was left one-on-one and acquitted himself pretty well. But I also thought he kind of had a little bit of a soft edge in pass protection, got knocked back towards the quarterback a little bit too often for my liking if I were evaluating him as like a normal starter. Right. And then also on stunt pickup, the Vikings struggled on that side of the line. Now, in a few cases, I thought it was Brandell who overcommitted on stunts, right? Blocked too hard towards Cam Robinson and then let a player back inside of him for pressure. That could be Brandell knows that Robinson is new, so he's trying to give him a little bit of extra help, and then he's late to come back inside. It could also potentially be Cam Robinson having a little bit too much width on his pass drops, and then Brandell, not feeling Robinson there, so he feels like he has to overcommit to that block on the crasher, and then the looper gets around him. So I think ultimately it's probably a chemistry thing that'll hopefully develop over time. But in the run game, I thought you could see Cam Akers' strength really show through. There were a couple plays where he was like knocking out an edge rusher and knocking that guy back from almost like the middle of between the hashes to the hash just on a kick out block, like getting, 3 or 4 yards of movement on a defensive end. I think it was Kwity Paye, just for whatever that's worth. And then you saw some absolutely phenomenal double teams. I mentioned, Ed Ingram and Garrett Bradbury in phenomenal double teams, moving the defensive line like 3 or 4 yards back. Robinson did that too. I thought, like with Ingram, there was a play where he whiffed on a second level linebacker that ended up making the play. There were a couple where he maybe overran something or didn't get enough push on a player or got knocked back in the run game. That kind of hurt a couple of runs. So it was, again, up and down in the run game for Cam Robinson. But overall, for a player who just got here last Wednesday, playing his first game with the team, I thought it was a pretty good debut. And I think you can see the signs of a player who, as he gets more experience in this offensive line, working as part of the unit, is going to be a lot better player. So that's the overall take from me on Cam Robinson. Again, up and down first game, but I like the move overall. I think the Vikings did really well to give up a little trade compensation, a 5th for 7th swap. Obviously, they can get more expensive, but also not give up, a lot of their salary cap. They were only paying like $2 million of Cam Robinson's deal as opposed to the $9 million that they could have been on the hook for. So, super happy with Cam Robinson. Great debut. I thought the locker room after the game where Kevin O'Connell gave him the game ball, that video was awesome. You can see him kind of tearing up a little bit. So really excited for him and hope he continues to have a successful season with the Minnesota Vikings, right? I mean, obviously I hope everybody on the team continues to have a successful season with the Vikings. If we flip it over to the defensive side of the ball, first, I just wanted to shout out Harrison Phillips, who I thought had an absolutely phenomenal game. The Colts really couldn't get anything going at all on the ground. There was a Jonathan Taylor run that I think went for 13 yards. There was an Ashton Doolin jet sweep that went for 12 yards. So that's 25 total yards. The Jags had 68 rushing yards in the game on 19 attempts. So you take those 2 plays away, and the jet sweep was just kind of the Vikings defense got caught off guard. There wasn't really anything poor with the run defense. You take those 2 plays away, that's 43 yards on 17 carries. That's less than 3 yards a carry. There really weren't many successful plays at all for the Jacksonville Jaguars to be had on the ground in this game. They had probably 3 of them. It was really bad for them. And I think Harrison Phillips was a big part of that. You see him just absolutely stand up and stonewall Ryan Kelly the entire game. There were a couple doubles where he absolutely stood up. Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson didn't move at all. The run goes straight into the line, and there's absolutely nothing happening. Phillips had 5 tackles in the game or shares of tackles in the game. 4 of those were run stops. The 5th was a 4-yard gain, right? So it's not like it's a tackle where he's dragged 7 yards down the field or something like that. It's a 4-yard gain. Really is still a failure by the offense from my perspective. So, a great game. And he had a tackle kind of wiped off the board where he, on the chop block play where Flacco scrambled and I guess got like a yard or two, Harrison Phillips got off of a block, contained him, and kind of made the tackle around the line of scrimmage. But obviously the penalty called that play back. So it was a bigger win for the Vikings with a penalty, but still another play by Harrison Phillips, who was just a stalwart in the middle, great at disengaging. There was your classic, Luke Braun calls it the Harrison Phillips moment of Zen, where he works to one side with an offensive lineman, disengages, is right there for the tackle. There was another play where I thought he did a really good job getting outside on outside zone, running with the blocks. And by the time, I think it was Murphy on the edge as well as Greenard Hill, who forced the run to cut back, Harrison Phillips is right there for a tackle for very little gain. So fantastic run defense. Phillips was started that. I mean, there's other guys to shout out. I'll get into a couple of the other players later. Bullard, again, had another good game, I thought, as well. He forced a holding call kind of as a pass rusher when Flacco tried to break the pocket. He made a couple of really nice plays setting up guys as well. Like Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Bullard are fantastic run defenders. Like anybody who wants to take them off the field on those downs is misguided in my opinion, because you're not looking for them to be primary pass rushers in that situation. You're looking to defend the run first. Once we get into second and longs and third and longs, they do come off the field and we try to rush other guys. It hasn't necessarily worked as well in the Rams game or the Lions game, but I think it was working very well here. And you saw that in terms of plays from like Jihad Ward and Greenard and Turner and Van Ginkel, all when the opposing team, the Colts, were in pass only situations, let's call them, right? So on the flip side of the fantastic run defense, the secondary was also great ultimately for the Vikings in this game. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are, but Flacco only threw for 100 some yards, on 27, I believe, pass attempts. He also had 3 sacks. He was also sacked 3 times, right? And he had the interception with no touchdowns, right? The Colts offense never got the ball into the red zone in this game. The only points they scored on offense were a field goal where they started in scoring position. They got 2 yards on the drive, and then a field goal at the end of the game where they ended up getting a defensive pass interference and then just automatically kicked a 54-yard field goal. Now, they did move the ball a little bit. It wasn't all the Vikings a complete shutout. They missed another 53-yard field goal. They had the interception, which was on the other side of the field. It wasn't in scoring range by the time they threw the interception, but it was, on the Vikings side of the field. And then finally the fumble on the first drive of the game, where it was just a botched handoff that the Vikings were able to recover. So that was, a little bit of good luck for the Vikings with that fumble and, the missed field goal. But at the end of the day, allowing no trips into the red zone is a phenomenal performance by the defense. And I thought the secondary played a lot tighter in coverage than they had over the last couple of weeks, and particularly Harrison Smith. Like I thought, to be honest, Harrison Smith had been struggling a little bit previously, where he just wasn't able to get to things quite on time. And that was not nearly the problem in this game that it was in previous games. Now, I don't think that the Colts attacked the Vikings defense as well as the Rams and the Lions did in the previous 2 weeks. But I also think that we have to keep in mind that the Rams and the Lions, especially the Rams with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, like I think the Rams with Kupp and Puka are a completely different team than the Rams without them. And they, if as everybody knows, had them for the game against us, right? So you look at the Lions with a phenomenal offensive line with a quarterback that's executing at a ridiculous level in Jared Goff right now. Like, I'm not going to call Jared Goff a top quarterback in the NFL necessarily, but he is doing exactly what is put in front of him by the offense. And they have great weapons with St. Brown and Laporta and those running backs who are also fantastic. And, elite play callers and Ben Johnson and Sean McVay in those games. You get somebody like Shane Steichen, who isn't quite as good. You get weapons on the outside where Michael Pittman is dealing with injuries and he's not up to the level of a Kupp or Puka or Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then you have like Alec Pierce, Ashton Doolin on the outside, and Josh Downs, who's playing pretty well in the slot, but he's again not one of the top receivers in the NFL like some of those other guys. You just don't have as potent of a passing attack. Like there were a number of plays where the Colts simply had no options down the field against coverages the Vikings run consistently. Like you see a bunch of guys mugged up on the line of scrimmage, you're expecting the Vikings to run Tampa 2. There are pretty stock standard answers for Tampa 2 that people have hit over the past couple weeks that have worked well against the Vikings, and the Colts weren't able to get to those and make those plays. They had a couple deeper plays down the field, but overall I thought the Vikings covered it pretty well. You saw like even on the first play, the first pass of the game, the Colts went to Kylan Granson and went for 22 yards. Harrison Smith is, I believe, a cover 3 safety on that play. He gets there and contacts Granson, who makes a nice catch through contact, right? That felt like a couple of the last couple of weeks where we saw Puka making some awesome catches against tight coverage. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown make catches, taking a hit to his back in the Lions game. That kind of felt like that a little bit. Then you get to later in the game where I think it was another cover 3 rep, and Harrison Smith drives down on an over route by Michael Pittman, hits him in the back, and the ball falls incomplete. He got there at the same time as the ball, made a big hit, and Pittman isn't able to bring it in. And then if you see, I think there was one play, and the very next play after, it's 4th and 2. The Colts are trying to attack the Vikings with man coverage. There's a slant route for Ashton Doolin. Harrison Smith's playing a robber role in that case. I think Stephon Gilmore was in good coverage on that play, but he was, inside Doolin. Harrison Smith comes out. It was outside Doolin, right on his outside hip. Harrison Smith comes from the inside, lays a big hit on Doolin. It's an incomplete pass from really both of them having good coverage on that play, and it turns the Colts over on downs. I think there's a world where you have really good play, where a team that has really good players still makes plays in those situations, because once you get to the best teams in the NFL, they're going to score points. They're going to make good plays against your defense. But I think that the Vikings defense, with the level that they executed this game, is going to be very good against most teams. And they were incredible in this game, right? So it's kind of a fine line between recognizing that, hey, look, the Vikings are playing zone coverage. There are going to be holes in zone coverage. Good opponents are going to exploit that, and they're going to, do that well. They play some man coverage that works in some cases. Against the Lions, against Khalif Raymond, where Stephon Gilmore kind of got bit by the turf monster and fell down, it didn't work at all, right? There are times where you have better opposing players that are going to beat you. And the Vikings secondary is kind of patchwork, if you really think about it, because of all of the some of the injuries that they had this offseason, obviously the unfortunate passing of Kyrie Jackson. They had to bring in all of these guys from the outside, Stephon Gilmore in training camp, and they've made it work extremely, extremely well. It's not going to be perfect against the best teams in the league, but it's going to be fantastic against teams like the Colts, and hopefully, as I get to them later, teams like the Dolphins. So I talked about a little bit about the ability to run man. I think they did that on a couple 3rd downs and 4th downs, and it was really critical for them to be able to do that. The Byron Murphy interception also came off of man coverage. So, just really good to see them be able to run some man. But like I said, it's not going to be the perfect answer for all it's not going to be the perfect answer for all situations, because at some point you run into a team that has better talent than you do. Wanted to close it out with a couple more defensive linemen. I thought Jonathan Greenard had another fantastic game. He was really an amazing signing over the offseason by the Vikings. Early on in run defense, there were a couple of plays that he just kind of completely blew up. There was one where he just walloped a tight end in the run game, and it ended up, basically forcing the play to be over. There was another where he just kind of ran over Quentin Nelson and helped make the tackle. That actually got credited to Bullard, who made a nice play as well. And Pace, who on that play, Pace slithered through 3 guys in a way I don't understand, but he's just so good at being able to get there. And then Greenard closed it out the game with 2 sacks on the final drive. He was threatening with the spin move against that left tackle, Gonsalves, who I think is a rookie or something, all game. and had a couple nice plays. There was one that might have turned into a hold. But I think the ball was out pretty quick, so it wasn't. And he wins very cleanly with the spin move right into Joe Flacco's lap on the first play of the Colts, final drive. And then he goes ahead and, wins again kind of later in the rep. Not uses a stab move to walk the, offensive tackle back into the quarterback. Flacco tries to bail to his right. Dallas Turner and Andrew Van Ginkel honestly are there and force him to kind of work back up into the pocket, by which point Greenard has disengaged and makes the sack. So really fantastic game by Jonathan Greenard. I also wanted to shout out Dallas Turner, who got, as many people have been talking about, his most reps since, I believe, week 1. He had something like 24 or something plays in this game. There were a couple of really interesting ones that I want to go over. The first was a play where he ended up taking on Quentin Nelson as a puller, right? So pretty stiff competition to go against there with Quentin Nelson for him. Nelson kind of blocks him, but he's able to disengage and get an arm around the running back, Jonathan Taylor, who does pull him a couple yards down the field. I think that would be a 4-yard play, but it was nice to see him be able to take on a block at the point of contact against a large human being who is great at blocking, right? Quentin Nelson's one of the best guards in the NFL, and still be able to disengage and make the play even if he got dragged a little bit on the play. So that was good to see. The next was a really interesting, I thought, pressure from Brian Flores, where the Vikings had 4 players on the line of scrimmage, and then out to the left, or the offense's right, I guess, was Dallas Turner, who was what I'll call an apex defender, which means he's kind of playing in between the slot receiver and the line of scrimmage. As the play kind of develops for the offense and they're getting near the snap, Turner comes down inside and shows and ends up blitzing Joe Flacco, while on the other end, Greenard drops out and kind of becomes the apex defender on that side. So the apex really is responsible for stuff underneath on plays to that slot defender, but the Vikings decided to show it on one end and blitz from the other end, right? So that was really cool. It was kind of a cool design, and it got Turner a free run at Flacco, and Flacco got the ball out, but it still got him a hit in the pressure. So, just the burst was nice to see from Turner there. Also, I mentioned on the rep, on the second sack by Jonathan Greenard, Turner did a pretty good job of pushing the pocket back into Flacco's lap, and then he was able to not lose contain while pushing the pocket, right? So he kind of came inside, Flacco tried to bail to the outside, and Turner still got at him and forced him back up in the pocket. So, some pretty interesting plays from Turner. I wouldn't say there was anything that was a dominant win, but I would say it was a pretty good game from him, and he flashed in a number of respects. You're not going to win every time as a pass rusher, but getting a couple pressures, even if they were unblocked pressures. By the way, there was another pressure on 0 where I think, where Flacco definitely got the ball off. This was the 4th down conversion on the last play of the game. I thought Byron Murphy just didn't play that play tight enough, but nobody blocks Dallas Turner, so he gets a free run at Flacco as Flacco gets the ball off before he's able to get there. And then one last play that I kind of wanted to shout out, that I thought was really neat, was the play where, if you remember from the broadcast, it goes kind of through Jonathan Greenard's hands. He's not able to make the interception. But what I really liked about this play was how the Vikings set it up and ended up running man coverage, but it subverted the Colts' expectations. So as the Vikings line up, it looks like they're in man coverage. When you have tight man coverage against an inline tight end, which is what the Colts had, you end up with a player, in this case it was Josh Metellus, kind of right over that player. And, he's kind of looking right at him as if it's man coverage. So the Vikings are showing man coverage pre-snap, and they run man coverage. But while Metellus was right over the tight end, I think it was Mo Alley-Cox, although I don't know the tight ends for the Colts all that well enough. They actually had Andrew Van Ginkel in coverage. So Van Ginkel's the pass rusher to the outside. typically you'd see that pass rusher try to run around him and run around the edge. And then, Metellus would still be playing man on the tight end. So the Colts, if they're thinking, okay, well, I'm hot on the protection if Metellus blitzes, but my hot answer is the tight end that Metellus is in man coverage on, right? So, if Metellus and to that side, the Colts had 3 blockers for 4 Vikings defenders, I should say, right? With the tight end releasing out on the route. So the 4th Vikings defender that makes Joe Flacco hot is Josh Metellus. The thing is, Josh Metellus blitzes, and Flacco can see that, but he can't go to his hot route, which is the tight end leaking out of the flat, because Van Ginkel's covering it, right? So it's a really nice wrinkle that Van Ginkel's in man coverage, and the fact that Van Ginkel is who he is gives the Vikings the flexibility to be able to do that in that situation. So because the left tackle is assigned to block Van Ginkel, essentially with the answer for if Josh Metellus blitzes is that they throw hot to the tight end. It adds an extra rusher, and it wastes the left tackle who has to go out wide before he realizes that Van Ginkel has gone out in the coverage. And what this allows Jihad Ward to do is run a pick or, be the crasher on a stunt, whatever you want to call it. He's the pick man on the stunt, running into the left guard, Quentin Nelson. And then Vikings actually have 2 loopers on the stunt. So it was Ward on the inside, Greenard, kind of lined up its 3 technique, Metellus head up over the tight end, Van Ginkel outside of the tight end, right? The left tackle thinks he's got Van Ginkel drops back into coverage. Ward attacks the left guard, who thinks he's blocking, Greenard, but that's how a stunt works. Like you try to attack the guy who thinks he's blocked somebody else and then have that guy loop around. Greenard loops around, to go to the center, Ryan Kelly. And he actually at one point ends up, Nelson does a pretty good job of getting off Ward, passing off to the left tackle who ended up figuring it out after a step and getting back into the play. But Greenard does such a good job against Ryan Kelly that he kind of holds up both Nelson and Kelly on the play. And you have Metellus come free as the second player. And he's able to get around and wrap around Joe Flacco, who's throwing the football. Ivan Pace allowed Trey Sermon to kind of be wide open in the flat in this play, but I think he was trying to account for a Flacco scramble kind of as well. Flacco throws the ball with Metellus wrapped around his waist, can't get anything on the ball, throws it right into Greenard's hands. Greenard can't make the catch. I mean, he's being blocked and jumping up and trying to make the catch. Like it was an easy interception that he dropped, and it goes to Ivan Pace, who almost makes the catch as well. So it was a really cool wrinkle on the coverage by flipping Metellus and Van Ginkel to me, and then also a really cool blitz by the Vikings on that play to help, kind of ruin the play for the Colts. So wanted to go over that, and that's kind of the last thing that I have on the Vikings-Colts game. Overall, really, really strong game from the defense. I thought a bounce-back game from the defense. Really like the ball movement on the offensive side of the football. Obviously, Sam Darnold needs to fix a number of the mistakes that he had in this game. We'll see moving forward what the Vikings kicker situation looks like with John Parker Romo as Will Rickards going on IR. So certainly questions for the Vikings on offense and in the special teams part of the game. But, overall, a strong performance on both sides that led to what probably should be considered a 2-score win, although they only ended up technically winning by 1 score. They still cover the spread and all that stuff. So better than a lot of people thought they would do. And that's even with how disastrous and how many negative plays that they had in the first half that kind of took points off the board for the team. So if we flip it over, the Vikings are playing the Jags in Jacksonville this week. So they're going down. I talked a lot about Cam Robinson earlier in the offensive review section, and it's a revenge game for him. Obviously, the Vikings just acquired him from the Jags last week, and it'll kind of be interesting to see how he performs in this game, because I think the Jags have a couple quality pass rushers on defense in Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, who have 6.5 and 5 sacks. I think Walker has the 6.5 and Allen has the 5 sacks, but they've been putting up numbers as pass rushers. I don't know if they've been incredible. I did catch some of the Eagles game this past week, and Hines Allen in particular seemed to be, actually getting quick pressure on the quarterback, which is something you always want to watch for. And that can kind of belie sack numbers, right? If they're getting pressure late in the downs or getting cleanup sacks or that sort of thing. But it'll be interesting to see the Cam Robinson matchup against those guys, because they've gone up against each other every day in practice, right? All throughout training camp. So they kind of know each other's moves and know what the other is going to try to do when they're blocking. So it'll be very interesting to see who gets the better of that matchup. I hope there's not a weakness that Robinson has that those two guys can kind of reveal. So, over the course of the game, but outside of Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker, I don't think there's much to write home about on this Jags defense at all. Tyson Campbell got paid a lot. I think he's probably a decent corner on the outside, but the rest of the Jags secondary is a mess to me. They're starting Ronald Darby, who's an older player, who's got a lot of experience in the league, but probably is not all that good at this point. Andre Sisco is a safety. I think has probably made a couple plays on the ball, but he doesn't inspire too much as a starter. And Darnell Savage, formerly of the Packers, who's been a disaster in coverage recently. You also have Devin Lloyd on the linebacker level, who I think has also been a complete disaster in coverage for most of the season, which is why the Jacksonville Jaguars are 31st in defensive DVOA on the year. So I think you can run the ball on these guys. I think you can throw the ball on these guys. I think the Vikings should have a field day against this Jags defense, which is pretty bad. The Vikings also have Cam Robinson, hopefully to provide input on, what the Jags pass rushers like to do, who they are kind of as players, and kind of some of the things that the Jags defense is doing. I mean, I'm sure he'll have more to say about the Jags offense in terms of their structure and what they're trying to do, because obviously he's an offensive player, but, it'll be an interesting matchup to see him go against those two pass rushers. The other stuff, I expect the Vikings to kind of be able to throw the ball all over the yard. The Jags have allowed 20 plus points in every game this season, with the exception of two games, one against the Browns with Deshaun Watson, who are an absolutely horrific offense, like setting records for how putrid their offense was, and one against the Patriots with rookie Drake May, who also have an absolutely putrid offense, right? So it's like, there's not a high bar to clear. You look at what Joe Flacco and the Colts did against them, and the Vikings just dominated the Joe Flacco-led Colts with pretty much the same roster of players. Now, there were a couple offensive line injuries for the Colts, I'll say, but, at the end of the day, they put up 34 points against the Jaguars. The Bears put up 30 plus points against the Jaguars, and they can't do anything against better quality teams. Like, they put up a bunch of points against the Panthers. They put up a bunch of points against the Jags, but they really can't do much against anything else in the NFL, as you saw last week against the Cardinals for the Bears. So, end of the day, like, this defense has put up a lot of yardage to not great offenses and a lot of points to not great offenses. The only offenses they've stopped have been some of the worst offenses we've seen in recent memory, and I think the Vikings should be able to get after them pretty effectively. You flip it over to the offensive side for the Jags, it's not much better. I got to watch two offensive games of the Jaguars because obviously I was watching Cam Robinson after the Vikings traded him, and man, there's not a lot to like. The offensive line, I think, is really poor, and I thought Cam Robinson, frankly, was the best player on that offensive line. The right side is kind of a disaster. Brandon Sheriff is not what he used to be. He's whiffing blocks all the time. Anton Harrison was rough in a lot. Like, he's got some highlight reel plays where he's got some real strength, and I think there's probably something there as somebody who was a first round pick the year before, or I should say in 2023, right? But it's certainly still not all put together for him. So that'll be interesting. They have Walker Little coming in and replacing Cam Robinson. Now, they did bench Cam Robinson for the final game, but it sounded like that might have been more of a, a weird disciplinary situation decision than they truly thought Walker Little was like a better option than Cam Robinson. And if they truly thought Walker Little was a better option than Cam Robinson, they would have been playing him earlier in the season, right? So that kind of tells you where we're at. Ezra Cleveland We're very familiar with Ezra Cleveland here. Has ups and downs. I think he can move really well still. I mean, I think we all knew that, but I just don't think he's a consistent down-to-down player. So I would expect him, and, the Vikings offense, the Vikings defense also knows Ezra Cleveland very well. They probably have a couple ways they can think of to attack. And that center is also just not very good at all. So, nobody on the Jags offensive line is good to me. I don't really think they're going to be able to protect Trevor Lawrence effectively. And their lack of ability to protect, I think, is led, and maybe it's just Doug Peterson's desires, but either way, they have just a disgusting passing game. It's really gross. It's a lot of quick game, trying to get the ball out of Trevor's hands as quickly as possible. Not a lot of downfield ability, even though they have Brian Thomas, and it's stuff where there's nobody open regularly. Trevor has to hold on to the ball for extra beats, try to make something happen, kind of get away from the pocket. And it's just not good offense to me. And I'm a little bit, probably biased because the Vikings attack downfield so much and they have such a robust way to get after defenses deep down the field. But I just don't like the way the Jags passing attack looked. And I mean, look, they're a 2-7 football team, right? If you're a 2-7 football team, you probably don't have all that good of a passing game. They can't block anybody. To me, either their running backs are absolutely horrific in pass protection. So it's rough. I think it has Trevor Lawrence playing skittish, his head's kind of flowing because I feel like he feels like he needs to make the play every single time. And that's led to some misfires. That's led to him wandering around in the pocket and taking a couple bad sacks. I just don't think he's in a good headspace in this offense. I think he's still a clearly very talented player, and I think he can operate at a high level. So it wouldn't shock me if Trevor Lawrence finally decides to have a good game and is able to attack the Vikings defense in ways that we don't necessarily expect. But just given the supporting cast around him, I just don't see the ability of those guys to step up. I like Tank Bigsby a lot. I think he's an explosive runner. I think Brian Thomas is an awesome, young receiver who's also been a really, really explosive player. I just think they don't really have anything outside of that. Evan Ingram has really struggled to me this year to be effective. There were so many targets that went his way in that Eagles game that he just wasn't able to bring in. He's also dealt with injuries. They lost Christian Kirk, so they have Gabe Davis and Parker Washington, who were completely uninspiring to me as their other receiving options behind Brian Thomas. I think if the Vikings focus on Brian Thomas like they focused on Malik Neighbors against the Giants, I don't think they'll have much of an issue with this offense at all. They ran one double on Malik Neighbors. They were rotating coverages to him, and they pretty much shut him down in the game, even though I think he probably led the team with 60-something receiving yards. It's just the rest of the Giants offense was able to do nothing. They couldn't block anybody on the Vikings. They couldn't run the ball. And I think it'll be kind of a similar story for the Jags here in this game. So I expect a pretty significant Vikings win. Now, all that being said, who knows? It's the NFL. Justin Jefferson said it pretty well in a press conference a couple of weeks ago. Nobody just walks in and hands you the win, right, in this league. So I'm open to being surprised by the Jaguars, but I just don't really see it unless something catastrophic happens to this Vikings offense for them to be able to win. So that's good news for the Vikings. I'm really expecting them to win this football game. You'd be 7-2 heading into your 10th game of the season, which I believe is against the Arizona Cardinals. So looking forward to this weekend. Hope the Vikings can pull it off. I think they probably should. But that's going to wrap up the podcast for today. So I am Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football. You can find my co-host Nick Olson at Nick Olson NFL. You can find Kindred Skulls, the podcast, at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also available on YouTube. Just search for Kindred Skulls. And with that, Skull Vikings.